Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer quick match gameplay. This time around I'm playing as the Greenskins against the Beastmen, led by Lance WMS on the map The Void of Hellfen. So right off the bat, as we go into the match, I want to say that I actually had a specific idea in mind, or a specific thing I wanted to test out with the Greenskins. Not just necessarily the Greenskins, but as a general test of death magic. But whenever I see, whenever I use death magic, or whenever I see someone else utilize death magic, whether that be on replays or in game against me or anything like that, or on YouTube or anything like from other YouTubers or anything like that, it seems that the main spells that you see used are of course Spirit Leech and Fit of Buna, which I think are the go-tos with Lord of Death, and then the Soul Blight, which is the armor and weapon damage, I do believe, debuff, and then the Purple Zone of Zerus. You'll see those two occasionally, but what you never see really utilized in any gameplay is either aspect of the Dread Knight or Doom and Darkness. Doom and Darkness is, if you overcast them, these both get an AoE. If you overcast Aspect of the Dread Knight, the duration also doubles. It improves leadership and makes those units cause terror. And of course, Doom and Darkness will also provides a negative leadership debuff to the units it hits. And one of the things that's pretty significant, I'm going to throw things into slow-mo because things will go a little slowly. One of the significant things about that is that with terror, first of all, you can first of all just make your own units immune to terror, which is something that I think can be nifty, at least for a little while. But also, more importantly, given that orcs are a very shock-heavy faction, you kind of charge in, do as much damage as you can, and hopefully break your opponent. If you don't, then you're probably in a bit of trouble. And I think that aspect of the Dread Knight could potentially be a very solid support skill to help me kind of quickly break an opponent's flank and just push in. And going into this match, I was expecting a really conventional Beastman build with Morgur and some Gore Bowls, and that wasn't quite what I got, but so it was a little harder, I think, in some ways to enact this ability, but nonetheless. So I brought in Azhag, of course, on Skullmuncher, because I was against the Beastmen who don't bring much in the way of flyers, and I thought this would kind of be a perfect test here. I think that these special death support skills really work the best with would work the best with Greenskins, because other factions already have their own sources of fear and terror and all that sort of stuff. Of course, he also does have Stand Your Ground and a Wah, but I did have to drop the Foe Seeker, because just to make space for some of my cavalry contingent. Then my front line is composed of 4 units of Savage Orcs. These are, of course, a very efficient unit, especially against a faction that doesn't really have much in the way of magic damage, because they have the built-in physical resistance, frenzy, psychological immunity while frenzy's up, but they just dish out a lot of hurt. Behind that, 2 units of Black Orcs, because these guys, obviously, I'm going against Beastmen, and Beastmen, while they're not known for their armor, they can often bring Bestigors. They'll often bring at least a handful, especially because they themselves will be expecting some armor from the Orcs, like Black Orcs, and so it's good to have Black Orcs in the mix, I think. Behind that, I do have a pretty strong shooting contingent of Night Goblin Archers, 2 units of them, and then the Rusty Airs. This is largely to counteract what I expected would be Gore Bulls, and so I thought if I spread them out and utilize their DPS, that'll be very useful. And then out of my flanks, I have 2 cavalry contingents, each composed of a Goblin Big Boss on a Spider, a unit of Night Goblin Quighoppers, and Orc Boar Boy Big Guns. And I was kind of hoping that this would give me a well-rounded counter to enemy infantry, enemy cavalry, and allow me to kind of dash into enemy backlines, disrupt them, all that sort of stuff. And my opponent is going a little sneaky with that left flank over there. And I could immediately see it's always important when you start a match, always look at the top of the bar to see what the enemy model count is, because that'll give you a good idea of what units, how much of their army you actually see. And so I immediately saw that. I saw about half their army here. I did some quick head math and knew that I only saw about half their army, because of course the Ungor Raiders are hidden. So my opponent did bring Malagor the Dark Omen, and this was his only hero, and only Lord/hero, and he is coming in with Devolve, Vile Tide, which actually can do and Traitor Kin, all of which can actually do really well against especially Savage Orcs. And he does have the Icons of Vilification, which will upgrade nearby allies, and just pretty strong in general. His front line is composed of a Gore Horde with shields, all I think slightly leveled up, all Veterancy 1. Behind that, 2 generic Gore Hordes, and then 2 Bestigors, and finally 2 units of Ungor Raiders in the very back. On my left flank, his right flank, my opponent has his ambush contingent, and this is composed of 2 Centaurs with great weapons. Actually, was it? Yeah, there we go. Centaurs with great weapons and Centaurs, and 2 Centaurs with great weapons, 2 Centaurs, and then 2 units of Gore Horde. Gore Horde, of course, without shields, being capable of Vanguard deploying. And the Gore Horde without shields aren't necessarily bad against orcs, who don't tend to have much in the way of ranged fire. Definitely not powerful ranged fire. So over here, though, I am kind of poking around. My original intent with this kind of force was either to push up this way or more likely push up this ramp. sneak into my opponent's back line. Because there had been no flank mover revealed up until this point, I kind of actually assumed that this part of the woods was clear. I assumed that if there was anything hidden, it was kind of out here, out on the flank here, and my opponent was just going to try to like pincer me once I pushed through. I didn't really realize it would be this far up with the Vanguard deployment. Anywho, I'm pushing forward. I'm slowly but surely making my way forward. The Savage Orcs, you can see a Vile Tide goes down here. I did try to pull this. I did stop and try to pull the Savage Orcs back a little bit, so they only took a really rather small amounts of damage there. If they'd walked in through it fully, they would have probably taken quite a bit. Savage Orcs have no armor, and physical resistance won't help against magic. Now my cavalry force is over here, standing a few feet away from my opponent's cavalry force, unable to spot him. But now my opponent, I don't actually think, I didn't actually spot these units until they broke cover. And this is the point where I realized that my opponent has a very solid flank there. Realized that I really have to counteract that. Actually, it looks like these guys didn't even get revealed because they came in under they were behind this lip over here. And so what I do is I start pulling my cavalry away. Unfortunately, I did start moving these archers to kind of intercept, and that would be a mistake. But fortunately, my cavalry contingent isn't too deep, and so I can bring both of them here to kind of counter this enemy charge. My opponent is being a little slow about pulling all these guys out. A little cautious about his committing, and you can see the Savage Orcs taking an absolute beating from these Ungor Raiders. But I'm here just trying to, despite having the same width front line, I'm actually succeeding in at least wrapping up around one flank and pushing in these Black Orcs. The Black Orcs will get hit by a Vile Tide, but they're pretty resistant to that. They have very high armor, so it's not going to do very much. In the meantime, though, my archers are pounding on these Bestigors, and I'm pushing in with Black Orcs and these archers out on the flank, which means I'll be able to get a nice crossfire. My archers immediately get overwhelmed, but over here you can see I have dropped Doom and Darkness and hit several units, especially the Gore Herds with them. And I have dropped Aspect of the Dread Knight on these Orc Boarboy Big Guns and the Night Goblin Squig Hoppers. So, you know, those famously terrifying squigs. And you can see how fast these Gore Herd is dropping. They will lose their leadership, and once they drop below 50%, that is when terror really starts taking hold. And you can see this entire flank, all of these Centigores, all of these Gores have routed off. And it's because, granted, Azhag causes terror himself, but that massive leadership debuff has actually caused this entire left flank to rout. This is a massive chunk of my opponent's army that would not have broken this quickly were it not for that sudden leadership debuff. Now these Centigores did bust through. Centigores actually have psychological immunity as long as their ability is up, but I'm getting them in the rest of the areas aren't breaking fast enough for them to these guys to just kind of move on, and now they're caught by the Orc Boarboy Big Guns, and Orc Boarboy Big Guns will trade pretty effectively with them, especially generic Centigores here without great weapons. Though to be fair, the great weapons aren't really necessary given how low the armor on the Boarboys is. Now Night Goblin Archers over here are actually still pounding away. They're still wailing on this Gore Herd, which hasn't really pushed in, kind of staying in reserve there. The rest of the areas, while wavering, with that support of the Orc Boarboy Big Guns, aren't really breaking. And over here you can see the Black Orcs, of course, holding their ground. They're a very strong holding force, even against the Bestigores. And they are getting flanked over here, which is okay. And you can just see, I'm using my army to just slowly but surely rat off the units that got terrified. They broke, they got hit by that terror bomb, and now they're all getting ratted off. The Gores got driven off by the Night Goblins, Squig Hoppers, so Azhag drove up some of the Centigores. He's coming back now. And in the meantime, my front line has held reasonably well, and these Boarboys have kind of mopped up my opponent's backline. I'm using my Squig Hoppers. They do have a bonus against infantry. I think they're a pretty solid all-around unit, albeit a little bit expensive as far as goblins go. And my force is really kind of holding here. Now over here you can see another Doom and Darkness going down, which forces this whole block of units to shatter under the combined weight of Azhag's Terror Bomb and, of course, just the leadership team. These guys just break, and I think that's just a very quick another sudden break. And so my opponent's army has now had two contingents, essentially two fairly large contingents that shatter. Now another spell here, Traderkin going down, which is okay. It does some damage, and it's not nice to me, but what can you do? I pop Wah, trying to mop through these Ungor Raiders, mop these Ungor Raiders over here. Although in the meantime, my archers though are wailing on these guys. The Night Goblin Squig Hoppers are losing, and they won't really be able to win in against Bestigores. But Orc Boarboy Big Guns doing okay. They do get hit by a Devolve, but you can see Aspect of the Dread Knight going down, and it's actually causing all of these other units to shatter. They're fleeing. Which only really leaves these Centigores, Malagor, who's now getting beaten up on by Azhag, and these Ungor Raiders. So my opponent's army is completely falling apart. You can see some of the units are coming back, but at the same time they're being pursued by Black Orcs, and Black Orcs are an absolute monster. And you can see my cavalry contingent, which was driving off my opponent's units, is now coming back. And so yeah, that's basically it. So I think. And these aren't really spells that got buffed in the last patch. These aren't like something like Dwellers Below or these aren't big and powerful fancy spells. They're not something that just shuts your opponent down like Net of a Mintok. They're not big and fancy spells like Dwellers Below or Final Transmutation or Foot of Gork or Pit of Shades, anything like that. They're not big and fancy, but I kind of wanted to demonstrate here and test out for myself because I hadn't really tried this out, but how useful some of these utility spells can be. They're very dirt cheap. I did not use a single Spirit Leech. I didn't use a single Fate of Buna that entire game. And I actually think that if I had relied on Fate of Buna, for example, to whittle down those Bestigors or the Centigores, it would have actually done me much not as good, or it wouldn't have done me as good of a job as the combo of Dread Knight, Aspect of the Dread Knight, and Doom and Darkness did, because the combination of those two essentially shattered my opponent's entire flanking ambush cavalry contingent. He lost 2 units of Centigores and 2 Gores right there, in the space of a few seconds, to a combination of Terror from Azhag, Terror from the units supporting Azhag, and then the leadership debuff. And then my opponent later lost an entire block of Gores and Bestigores, actually, because Bestigores are susceptible to Terror, that were surrounding my Black Orcs because of the massive leadership bomb, with that minus 16 just dropping them down. But Beastmen are very susceptible to this, so I think that against some other factions it might not be as useful. But honestly, if you're fighting against something like Chaos, which doesn't have Terror, doesn't have psychological immunity on most of their infantry, for example, this can actually be a pretty solid option, in my opinion. Against Empire, unless they bring Flagellants, you can melt them down pretty quickly. And you can see some of my units got some very solid kill counts. The Archers were doing some good support, and you can see the Night Goblins, Quick Hoppers, they were farming kills as these guys routed off. And I think it could definitely be very powerful. Just never underestimate those spells. Definitely they have a place, and I think you can use them. They were dirt cheap in comparison. Aspect of the Dread Knight Overcast is like 9 wins of magic, and it's like 14, I think, for Doom and Darkness when it's Overcast. And Aspect of the Dread Knight isn't as important. Honestly, you don't have to Overcast Aspect of the Dread Knight unless you're looking for the leadership / terror resistance. If you're just looking to cause terror, 1 unit is enough. It's just the proximity to a unit that causes terror is good enough. And I actually think I made a bit of a mistake there by overcasting it. It was a bit of a waste. But the Doom and Darkness minus 16 leadership on a 40-meter AoE is amazing. And that game, it basically allowed me to selectively pick apart my opponent's front line. Now, of course, the rest of your front line does still have to hold, but that's something that this is kind of just an orcish thing in general, that you struggle to hold lines sometimes, and so that's why you have to bring Black Orcs, really, to help hold that front line, because Savage Orcs won't hold up in the long run. But definitely, I think this was solid. I do hope you guys, I do hope this was a helpful bit of a helpful video. I hope this perhaps gave you guys some inspiration for how you can use some of your alternatives for some of the spells that aren't as common. Definitely don't sell them just because you will mostly see flashy spells, or like that you'll see people utilize certain spells that they prefer over others, or certain spells that are easier to use, perhaps, or I wouldn't even necessarily easier to use, but or just in general flashier spells, or spells that do direct damage. Don't underestimate the utility spells. They can definitely be very good when used correctly or against the correct opponents. So yeah, I do hope you guys found this video useful. I do hope you guys found it entertaining and kind of gave you some inspiration. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any further questions about Quick Match, any questions about Total War Warhammer, or anything, what I think about Total War Warhammer 2, anything like that. If you have any questions in general, be sure to ask those down in the comments. I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, I appreciate you all for watching, and Wyvern out.